Well, it seems like the only thing that's in the news these days is Brett Kavanaugh and the accusations against him, and the whole question of who should we believe? Do we believe the woman? Do we believe Kavanaugh? Or both, or what? And for most people, it just shakes out to whatever political party they're in. If they want Kavanaugh on the court, then they tend to believe him and discredit the woman. If they oppose him on the court, then they believe the accusers. But the bigger question of that this brings up that's in this whole Me Too movement that's so important for us to consider is so many people are saying always believe the woman. That's the only solution to the epidemic problem we have of abuse of women. So many women have been brutalized by men, sexually assaulted, raped, and all kinds of other things. And that's happened throughout the centuries. It's a problem that plagues mankind. It's still a problem in our culture. And it's a massive, massive problem. You talk to women, there's so many women who at some point have been abused or molested. And something's got to be done. And so the culture has kind of landed on this idea that, well, maybe the solution is always believe the woman. If a woman makes an accusation, just assume a woman would never lie about something like that. And if we just always believe the woman, then that might help solve the problem. I think it's good. One thing that's coming out of this that's good is society is becoming very harsh against men who do these kinds of things. If it can be proven that a man has abused a woman or molested her or something like that, the penalty should be very, very severe, and that's what we're seeing. So all that we're seeing now with Weinstein and Cosby and Lauer and all the rest, I'm glad to see that. However, this when it's assumed that we should always believe the woman and that a woman wouldn't lie, that is a misunderstanding of human depravity. All human beings are fallen and depraved and sinful, and all of us abuse the power that we have. We just have a tendency to do that. And so for men, the power that men have over women tends to be physical, stronger physically, and so they can dominate women. And also socially, very often men are in positions of power, like Weinstein, and he can affect women's careers, and he can use that for against them to get what he wants. And so those abuses of power, politicians sometimes use their power to abuse women. Women, on the other hand, have a different kind of power. And one of the kinds of power a woman has is the ability to make an accusation, to take advantage of the sympathy that society has towards women who have really been abused and make a false accusation in order to harm a man or get what they want in some way. That's a problem. That's a documented problem. You can see, in fact, just one example I heard recently, there was a man who, his girlfriend was angry with him, and she told him, I'm going to report you for raping me, even though it didn't happen. She said, I'm going to tell them that you raped me, and you're going to be in so much trouble and everything. And she called 911, and while she was on the phone with 911, she actually covered up the phone and said it again to him. She said, you're going to be in so much trouble, and she laughed at him. Got back on, and she was crying and making this big act of having been raped, and said that he used a weapon and everything. And she didn't know it, but it turns out he was recording the whole thing. So he had a recording of her saying these things. When they came to arrest him, he told them about the recording. They didn't want to hear it. They put him in cuffs, took him away. But when the DA finally listened to his recording, of course, they let him go, but they said, the DA told him, the prosecutor told him, I would have recommended 20 years in prison if you didn't have this recording. How many guys who are falsely accused happen to have a recording of the woman admitting that it was a false accusation? How many men are in prison for 20 years for something they didn't do? And that's been a problem throughout history. You can go all the way back to Genesis. It happened to Joseph, who was a godly man, and a woman made advances to him, and he had the integrity to say no, and she became so angry she got angry, accused him of assaulting her, and he went to prison, and justice was not done. We need to understand the importance of how horrific it is for a woman to be assaulted, and also how horrific it is for a man to be unjustly accused. Proverbs 17:15 says, acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. both. Letting a guilty person go free is a horrible thing. And an innocent person being condemned is also a horrible thing. And we need to avoid them both. So what's the solution? If the solution isn't to just always believe the woman, we got to do something. It's such a problem. We've got to do something. So what action should we take? And that's the crux of the issues. Everybody's talking about who should we believe. Should we believe the woman? Should we believe the man? It doesn't matter who you believe. Believe who you want. You can believe Christine Ford. You can believe Kavanaugh. You can believe them both. It doesn't matter who you believe. The question is, what action should society take based on what we know? And the answer to that question is in Deuteronomy 19. Deuteronomy 19 is a section where God gave ancient Israel guidelines on how to handle situations where someone is accused. And in verse 15, it has this principle: one witness is not enough to convict a man accused of any crime or offense he may have committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of two or at least two witnesses. So unless there's at least two witnesses that can confirm something happened, you don't take action on it, even if the person is guilty. Even if the person is guilty. The matter's not established unless you can prove he's guilty with two or three witnesses. And so that's the standard for accusing a man, and it's also the standard for accusing a woman of making something up. So though if you're in favor of this woman and you're against Kavanaugh, you can't condemn him for an action based on the testimony of one witness. And if you think that this woman is lying, if Christine Ford is lying, you can't accuse her of that. That's a false accusation. You can't accuse her of that and condemn her for that unless there's two or three witnesses that can corroborate that she's lying. We don't have that either. So you can believe who you want, but the action that we take is based on it. The matter is just simply not established. Even if someone's guilty, it's not established that they're guilty unless there's due process that goes all the way back to Deuteronomy 19. You have to have adequate witnesses. Then he goes on, and this is really interesting. The next verse, he says, if a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse a man of a crime, the two men involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priest and the judges who are in the office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against his brother, then do to him as he intended to do to his brother. You must purge the evil from among you. So what he's saying there is, if somebody makes an accusation, it can be proved that that's a false accusation, then the person making the accusation should suffer the same penalty that that accused person would have suffered had he been found guilty. So in the case of that recording, that woman who accused him of rape, that woman should have gone to prison for 20 years because it was proved that she was making a false accusation. That's the standard. And if we had that standard, we could virtually eliminate false accusations like this. And that would help women who have really been abused, because a woman would be very unlikely to make it up because she could go to prison for 20 years. And so only the real cases would be brought. And if a woman, then women would be more likely to be believed when they make their accusations. It would help women and it would protect men. And it would be more justice on both sides. Now, if I were in charge, that would be the standard. I'm not in charge, and so it's not going to be the standard. There's zero chance that our society is going to adopt that principle. But let me just say this for our personal lives, and this is a very practical thing that we can consider regarding the gossip chain. Gossip is a real problem in the church and outside of the church. I'm amazed, now that I'm working in the secular world, I'm just blown away at, it's like being in 7th grade again, the gossip that goes around. It's just unbelievable. And it's very damaging. And what I want to say is this: if you participate in the gossip chain, you pass something along, you hear some juicy little tidbit, and like, oh, did you hear that so-and-so was mean to so-and-so? She said that this, and he said that. As soon as you pass it on, you are making an accusation. You realize that? You're making an accusation, not in a court, but worse than in a court. Because at least in a court, the person accused could defend himself. And bring some sort of, in the gossip chain, in the rumor mill, it goes to everyone before anybody finally has the integrity to go to the actual person accused and confront them. By then it's too late. Everybody's been convinced and his reputation is trashed. And even if you try to say, well, I don't know this for sure. I just heard this, and for what it doesn't matter. The person you're talking to, you're their friend. They trust you to some level. If you're they're probably going to think, well, if he's bringing it up, there must be something there. Proverbs 18:8 says, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels, and they go down into a man's inmost being. When you hear gossip, it affects you. It affects your opinion of the person you're hearing about, even if you try to remain objective. And so damage is done. Now, consider this principle. If you're gossiping, you're making an accusation, and if that accusation isn't true, guess what? You deserve the punishment that that person would deserve if the accusation were true. And that might not happen, that justice might not happen in this life, but God is a just God. On Judgment Day, something's going to happen. God is just, so be very careful about gossip.